How's it going, guys? Today I'm going to be going through my fighter DPS build. It was requested on the little poll thing I did on YouTube a week or so back, and I think people might have got their eye out for it after I posted my damage board from that first trial completion. But I do have to warn you before I go into this. I don't typically play DPS very often, because like most games, Neverwinter is oversaturated with DPS. I'm stuck on tank a lot of the time. Even though I really love tanking in games, it can be fun to do something different, and sometimes the game gives good opportunities to do this. Back in Tom, I played the Wizard and the Cleric DPS, which was insanely good, as a lot of people probably remember. Actually, both of these were good. But for Tom, you didn't need supports as much. It was pretty much a 1-1-8 meta for its whole life, so it was easy to just go in there and do any DPS. I was pretty good at the Cleric, but the content got very easy and everyone got so overpowered it didn't mean much to run it anymore. After that, I did get interested in the fighter DPS because I liked hitting things with a big hammer. The powers you use on it just seemed like powerful, you know, like you just breaking some legs and cracking some skulls, you know, it's a pretty cool DPS class in my opinion, even if it's not the strongest. Arguable if it's very strong now, since it did catch a few buffs since a couple of mods ago, but I think any of the DPS are in a decent enough place right now to play whatever really. Bit of an intro there, but it's convenient that a DPS class that I actually kind of like playing is also a very strong tank, and that kind of contributed to me maining the fighter over the last couple of mods since I switched over from the paladin. The fighter can put out some very respectable numbers as well in both single target and AoE, and this build will be focusing mainly on the single target since that's what we're set up for this mod, since it's a trial mod. I can show you my AoE powers and stuff also later in the video. The disclaimer I guess I was starting with earlier is that I don't play DPS a lot. This is by no way an optimized build, and I'll show you as I go through it what you can change up to really fine tune it to make it a more perfect DPS build. But for cost and time effectiveness, this build isn't 100% perfect, and most builds really aren't anyway. So I'm feeling pretty genuine here and just being straight up with you guys. At least you know it can put out the numbers like I showed on my first trial completion short. And remember that is also due to not taking downs in the trial and doing your typical recommended routine of getting good uptime on your powers, learning the trial and the other content you're in, and just generally playing good. Playing good will always have a massive effect on your performance, of course, and the build you put together for your character won't be the be-all end-all of your character. So your results may vary and all that. You'll see what I mean from some of the stuff I've not optimized on the build, that every little detail isn't super important, but everything does help if you want to take the role you're trying to play seriously. So first things first I'll talk about here I guess is actually the core gameplay of the fighter. Just a few little notes here. First thing to note is that you have this bar here, on the right, the Vengeance bar. Having this bar above 50% will actually give you a 20% damage buff, so this is something pretty important to keep in mind whenever you play in this class. Little spoiler here for the rest of the powers, but just noting this here on the side, this is something you'll want to keep track of, and you'll basically never want to be fighting unless that bar is over 50%. Seethe, or the DPS versions of the dig-in mechanic, is actually the way that you can build that up without getting hit. The way that my build is set up, you're actually only going to do this right at the start of the fight, and that's pretty much it unless you really need to, and you'll see that from some of the feats we also have down at the bottom. Because of having this mechanic here for the RB, it also uses our stamina, and it does mean that the fighter does not have a dodge mechanic. And as we found out from the latest trial, it's a pretty big hindrance actually, since most of the people in there are just saying, oh, just iframe the knockback, which the fighter clearly can't do. It's actually the only DPS class in the game that can't dodge and doesn't have an iframe exactly, so that kind of is something to keep in mind when you're playing this class. It would be nice if, since you can actually gain the Vengeance in other ways than just holding down the RB or the tab, if they actually did put a dodge on the fighter, but that's not something I'm holding my breath for. Another cool thing about the fighter is that you actually have very, very good stats compared to some other DPS classes. This is due to a couple of things on the page here. Down at the bottom, we have Tactician's Edge, which increases your combat advantage by 10% whenever your stamina's full. Now, keeping the stamina full, this is actually something that not having a dodge helps the fighter with, because we're not ever going to use stamina in combat. It's going to be full pretty much the entire time, which means we can take advantage of stuff like this. This is 10% extra combat advantage that other DPS classes aren't going to have. We also have this class feature here, which increases our crit chance by 10% when our stamina's full. So you see where I'm going with this? If we have our stamina full the whole time, we don't need to use it by digging in to gain that vengeance, then we're going to have 20% extra offense stats that other DPS classes aren't going to have. So that's one good thing about the fighter, is that we have these extra stats we don't have to build into exactly. And the last core thing I feel like to mention on the fighter is that a lot of the damage from the fighter actually comes from the magnitude of our encounter powers. This is different from a lot of other DPS classes, since most other DPS classes rely on a lot of bleeds, which the fighter doesn't have any bleeds. It doesn't have any dots, damage over time effects at all, other than, you know, say if you put the combat enchant or something like that. These encounter powers have generally long cooldowns compared to other classes, even though they do high magnitudes. So looking at more recharge speed is something that is just something also to keep in mind when you're actually building the fighter. High recharge speed is really going to help you get those encounters back, which is going to help you get more damage out. Now I've talked about those main core mechanics of the fighter, we'll actually start going through the build. First thing we'll talk about here is the race. I am obviously not an optimal race for a DPS class. The Drow is not the best you can use here. I do believe in my stats also for the Drow. I have this built into Dexterity and Charisma, if I remember correctly, which obviously isn't the best attributes you can use for a DPS class either. For the fighter, I prefer Strength and Charisma. So the Charisma's okay, but the Dexterity isn't really helping me there. Also for the actual bonuses of the Drow, obviously the Darkfire bonus does help for DPS. It's more of a group DPS bonus, so that's why I like using it for the tank. It's not the worst thing you can pick. Like, I'm not mad about playing a Drow, since it helps just the whole group get more damage out, and often there isn't actually a Drow in the group, so it's not the worst thing. But the other stat that it gives is Deflect Severity, which obviously doesn't help us at all with a DPS. Personally, I think one of the most overlooked races, the free races, would be Human, since Human actually has the most useful stats, having 1% bonus in all the offense and defensive stats. But other than that, any of the races which have a stat that's particularly going to help you, like a lot of people use Gith for the combat advantage, or they use Wood Elf for the crit chance, or Dragonborn or Aasimar or something else that gives good offensive stats. Really, the race doesn't matter too much, but if you're really optimizing, you can look into exactly what you need, exactly what stats you need. That would be the best way to do it. Now that we've got through the race and the ability scores, we'll just head over to the equipment page. Now, before I go through all this equipment, I do just want to clarify here that this was the build that I was using for the trial, and that's pretty much just what I'm going to be showing you today. I might do a reprised build later on, which is a bit more focused and fine-tune everything, but for now I'm just going to be going through exactly what I was using, bar one item. There's only one thing that's different in here from what I had when I was running, and I'll show you it when I get to it. Just going through everything in order here. First we have the this new Alliance Soldier's Helmet, which is the one that gives you the 7.5% accuracy when your stamina's full. Now, this one I think is good on the fighter because of the stamina things I mentioned earlier. When we were actually running the trial, a lot of the DPS were taking this helmet off. They were avoiding using this helmet because they were dodging a lot, right? Which takes away that stat they're trying to get. But on the fighter, this isn't a problem. We're not using any of the stamina while we're fighting. I mean, I'm personally not in my build, so this helmet's actually really good. It's always up, and it's a new higher item level as well, so I think personally this one's a really good option. The chest piece here is obviously the Blessed Bone Devil's Ribcage. This is just, it's going to be the best piece you can use. It's so much free stats that you get there. Everyone pretty much should be using this on a DPS if you can get hold of one. It may be replaced with the new one, with the Mythic chest piece when that comes out, with the accuracy and the combat advantage. But we'll see when we get to it. For now, this is definitely the one to go with. These arms are kind of a questionable piece to be using. Obviously, these arms, along with the chest piece, come from the hunts in Avernus. This arm bonus here is still bugged, as far as we can tell, as when you have no teammates within 30 feet of you, your power and defense is increased by 5%. It's only when you have one teammate that's not within that range, which in the trial is pretty much all the time. There's always somebody that's that far away from you, especially because the boss is so massive. This isn't a piece I would exactly recommend, and there's something I'll show you later on in the build, which is where I would swap this out. I would add in more power somewhere else and actually remove this. I'm only doing it to get the extra 5% power. This build also doesn't use the Legacy Watermelon or anything like that, which a lot of people do still use, the 10% power and accuracy. So I did need to get that little bit of extra power in here. It just worked for me. It just worked at the time when I was putting the build together for the trial. The weapons, obviously the Mastercraft weapons. I always recommend to use these. I really do think using all Mastercraft weapons in the group is going to be the best way to go about it. Even when the new ones come out, if they don't have the artifact enhancements on them, then I'm probably going to be keeping the old ones, honestly, unless it's really that big of an item level difference. Same thing with these in the trial. A lot of DPS were running Lionheart and went, oh no, we need to take these off because we're dodging all the time, using up all the stamina. You would be able to use the Lionheart on the Guardian Fighter, but just for the sake of best case scenario, best setup, we are going with the mastered Bronzewood weapons, the Mastercraft weapons. Obviously, the artifact modification on here is the increased damage to heavy slash, since that's going to be our main at will we use. With the offhand, I go for recharge speed because, like I said earlier, I like recharge speed a lot on the fighter. It really helps with those cooldowns, for the long cooldowns for the encounters. And then I have accuracy down here just because that was what I needed to balance the stats out. For the boots I've got on the Wasteland Wanderers, these are the ones from the Hardcore Boss mini bosses, which is going to give you that 5% combat advantage when you're 25 feet or closer to your target, which obviously we're a melee class, we're always going to be there. It's as simple as that. For the artifact set, I've actually gone with the new Mythalar set. I did like this set when it came out. I didn't actually have the demo set on the fighter yet, because I hadn't put together a DPS build back then, so I just went with this one for now. I'm still not 100% sure on which one's actually better. I was going to use the Mythalar set on the tank as well, because the fighter has lower crit on the tank. But yeah, I really like this set. I think it's really good that it procs off of all combat advantage damage, and it works really well with the Band of Air. Yeah, I think this is a really good set. It worked out for me, so this is the one I would use. I have the Red Eyes Glare here, the 5% power and the 2.5% accuracy to go with my Band of Air ring. I did see a lot of people using particular damage type rings for the trial. They were using either the undead rings, one of the few undead rings, and then also they were using like the Dragon Overload enchantments or the Undead Overload enchantments. I just wanted to go for this one for the power and accuracy. I needed a bit more power, and I didn't really want to go with one of those bonuses that were only going to be up partially. I only really used that on the scroll and the potion for the dragon bonuses. I wasn't really looking at getting the specific damage bonuses for the either undead or dragon, and then it only being useful for part of the time in the trial. So I just went with this ring. It helped me with stat balancing, so it worked out for me. Obviously the Band of Air, like I showed before, this is just a no-brainer for DPS classes. It's going to be it until they come out with something better or they nerf it, because this is just one of those items that's going to be very strong for a very long time. For the shirt down here is one of the new ones from Dragonbone Veil. It's the plus 5% combat advantage shirt. It also has that little bit of recharge speed on there, which is pretty nice, and it's one of the newer item level ones. It's not as high item level as, say, the Hell's Negotiator, you know, any of those shirts from the Hunt in Avernus, but it's still pretty high, and it has a good bonus getting that extra 5% combat advantage. For the pants, I actually went with one of the older pieces that people might have used in the past from the Professions. I like this extra AP gain that it gives, even though the AP gain isn't really a problem on the fighter, but it was also because it gave offense stats, and I was a little bit short on one of the offense stats, so I was kind of like working around that. The pants isn't a big deal, it was just something that I was being picky about, trying to get my stats really balanced. Now here for my artifacts, I have gone with the 3 Dragon Hearts. I was prepared for people to fight me on this if I got into the group in the trial and people wanted to use it. This is one of the options you're going to want to use. The fighter benefits more from the Dragon Hearts than it would from the journals, because the cooldowns make a bigger difference on the fighter than they do on a lot of other classes, as well as the fact that there's not a lot of dots. You don't have a lot of hits on a fighter. You're not going to be proccing the journal bonus as much as a lot of other classes are. So personally, I do think, and I know everyone's going to make the case for it because now everyone's onto the recharge speed thing, but I do personally think that the fighter is one of the classes that should be using the heart set, just because those cooldowns, like, you're really going to make a big difference out of them. The only thing I would say to give up the heart set for somebody else to use it, if you have a rogue that's using Stealth Wicked Reminder, which is a big group-wide damage buff, or you have a hunter that's trying to keep good uptime on Commanding Shot, they're the 2 classes I would say would benefit more from having the heart set on over the journals. In the end, that would be the thing you would do on the fighter. If somebody else was using it, you would try and swing for the journal set. Well, first thing you would do is you would try and swing for the for this here. You would try and use the Mythalar artifacts for that debuff on your main. If you can't get away with that, so that you could put the 3 hearts down here, then you could always go with putting the journal set in here and having the frozen up top. And obviously, this is something that everyone's going to be fighting for. Everyone's going to be fighting for these, like having these setups. The other one would be, is you could probably use the Demogorgon set, put the Demogorgon artifact up here in the main one, and obviously excuse this, they still don't change when you look at them, unless you inspect them, because it's still bugged on the character page. But yeah, you could put the Demogorgon artifact up here and then still have the 3 hearts down at the bottom here. So there's a few configurations you can do to make sure you still have the heart bonus, or at least you could still have the journal bonus if that was how it worked. Hopefully when you get the build set up, you can argue in the group that you can go for either the Mythalar artifact, the Heart of the Black Dragon, or the Demogorgon's Reach. Any of the 3, you'd still be able to get 2 bonuses set up, which is going to be ideal. I'll just quickly show the stats page here. Like I said earlier, the fighter has a pretty good balance of all the stats because of all the extra stat bonuses it gets from its powers and stuff. This is obviously unprocced, nothing up. When you get all your potions and you get your companion enhancement and you have your rib cage up and stuff like that, these stats are all going to be pretty high. I'll show you it towards the end. They're all going to be pushing 90%, but a lot of them are not quite reaching 90%. It was quite hard to balance them all, and then also there's some other things to keep in mind when you're in a group. A lot of the groups at the minute are running a tutor companion, which gives everyone 5% combat advantage, so you can actually run with 5% lower combat advantage than necessary. Same thing with the paladin. A lot of paladins are running the 2% crit strike aura, and also runic aura from the mount bonuses, which gives you the extra power. So there's a few things there that really bump it up a little bit. The other thing as well is you can just eat invocation blessings, and that can give you another little extra percentage, which can go into anything really. If you have everything just under, then anything you get from it will be useful, or you can focus it and eat a bunch to get the right one. My recharge speed down here is also pretty good. 33% is pretty high. That's something that I was really wanting to focus on, and I have it in pretty much everywhere I can get it. The enhancements page, I have to remember to say enhancements, it's not enchantments anymore, I keep forgetting that one. But this is pretty much just a mess. It's pretty much just a mix of all different enchants here. I was just swapping them all around when I was balancing just to get the right stats in, and obviously the defensive ones don't matter as much. I just have in whatever I had left over, because obviously fine-tuning defensive stats isn't really going to make a difference on a DPS class, so that's just the way I've done it. I focused these ones, got them all tuned, and then I just put whichever ones I had left over into this side. I also use these over for the tank build. I just chop and change. I just do it the opposite way on the tank build. I focus which defensive stats I need and then just put whatever left over into the offense. If you have a class where you're playing both a support and a DPS, this is probably something you're going to want to do just to be a bit more cost effective with all this stuff. For the utility, I've gone with Forte down here. And for the bonus, I've gone with recharge speed. I would usually go with movement speed for dungeons, but since this was a trial and I was really trying to get that higher recharge speed for just more damage output, I did go with this one here. The combat enchantment is of course Poison Thorn. As far as I'm aware, this is still the best one for DPS. And then for the overloads, I actually don't know if I was using that one. For the overloads, I'm pretty sure I was using Devil's Precision for the 5% crit chance, 5% accuracy. And then also I was using obviously the Rage of Flames, which are also a very good one. These things I pretty much only use when it's a hard piece of content, when it's something new that we're really trying to get through. Otherwise, they're not really worth the money to use them. Obviously, some other good ones are the Corrupt Black Ice, which gives you the AP gain. And obviously the dragon one, like I have put in there, the Dragon Slayer would probably be good for the dragon, which is obviously only part of the dungeon, part of the trial is actually going to work. I do have that in there on the right. I actually don't remember which combination I used, but honestly, you can't go too wrong with any of these. I'd probably have to test it out a few more times to see really if that's going to be the most useful way to do it. Thinking about it, I might have actually changed to the Dragon Slayer because the first part of the fight, where it counts as undead, was really easy. We were getting through it really quickly. And then later on in the dungeon was where it was getting harder, so I might put that on later on in the attempts. I'll just show the appearance page here, since I usually get a lot of comments of people wanting to know the appearance on all of my stuff. So I'll just scroll through so it's just all on the page at least for anyone that does want this. Okay, now we get to the powers page. Obviously, this is going to be a pretty important page. Obviously, using Heavy Slash as your main at will, it does the most damage as well as having this increased 5% damage dealt buff. So you're always going to want to be hitting this to make sure that buffs up for all your other attacks. Reeve, I just like to use when it's an AoE situation or a range situation. It's good to have as just that second option. If you're ever too far away from the boss, you can't get in there because there's a mechanic like a AoE or something in the way. You can just use this to hit them from a distance. Or when all the mobs spawn, like in the new trial, you can just start using it and it will just hit everything. Honestly, the mobs are pretty weak in the new trial. I was pretty much one-shotting them with all the encounters, but they're obviously all single target hits. So Reeve does help to hit a few more enemies at one time. Bull Charge, I do really like. I know that this is a staple power that people like to use on the DPS fighter. It pairs with the Momentum class feature, which makes it deal extra damage. Your movement speed is increased when you're running around. it's just a pretty nice encounter. It makes it a really strong magnitude. The other thing that is obviously really useful about Bull Charge is that it does lunge you towards the enemy. It's something that I was making use of quite a lot in the new trial and in any of the trials really. If you have to move away from the fight because you're doing mechanics, you can use it to charge back in faster, so you get that little bit better uptime on your powers. It has a pretty big range on it. You know, it has a pretty big range. You can launch back into the fight, and it also has a pretty low cooldown here, which makes it one of the best powers you can use, in my opinion. Anvil of Doom is just really fucking cool. It's just a really badass power where you just hammer them on the head, which is really nice to go with my Warhammer that I like to use. But this has a really high magnitude. It also pairs with the Weight of Vengeance feat down here, which gives it that 380 extra magnitude, and also gives it a 4-second shorter cooldown. This power is just great. This is obviously a very good encounter power to use. And then the third power is kind of usually like it's kind of a toss-up, because Commander Strike is obviously a very strong power. It gives that 10% physical damage vulnerability, which is the same bonus as Wicked Reminder or Takedown on the Barbarian tank. All of them will apply the same effect. The thing with Commander Strike is it does have a really high magnitude as well, which is really nice. Same with Wicked Reminder on the Rogue. The thing with Wicked Reminder is that if you do Stealth Wicked Reminder, it also provides a 10% crit avoidance debuff, I believe it is. I mean, it makes it just the best version of this you can use. So really, if you have a Rogue in the group, they need to be the one running it. That's just going to be better for group damage in general. But obviously, you could use it if there's not a Rogue in the group, which honestly, if there isn't a Rogue in the group, then it might not be that useful anyway. It probably would still work out to be more damage because of the mowdown feat for the extra 400 magnitude. The other option would be, ideally you have a Rogue using the Wicked Reminder. You can use Griffin's Wrath, which is it's a 3-hit combo and it's a really high magnitude total, and this doesn't have that long cooldown either. Obviously these cooldowns I'm looking at now is because I have all that recharge speed, which they would be a lot higher without it. And it's a little 3-hit combo you can do here. For the dailies, I always have on Earthshaker just because I really like this power. You punch the ground and it stuns all the enemies around you and does some nice chunks of damage. Really the power you're going to be using in trials, in single target fights, is going to be Mowdown, which has a massive magnitude for a daily. It's really fucking chunky. And also you can cancel this as well because it does 2 hits, but the second hit still goes off even if you cancel it. So that would be the way to do it. We went over the class mechanics earlier on. I guess the only thing we didn't go over was the Forte, which we have extra accuracy for the fighter. Yay! That's not actually a bad thing because we have really high other bonuses as well, so it kind of all works together. For the class features, like I mentioned before, I like the critical strike bonus. If I could get the critical strike somewhere else, I would just put the movement speed on, since we don't have a dodge, which I think would be pretty nice. Some people also like using combat superiority, which gives the at-wills a bonus 10% damage after using counters, which means you're going to have that pretty much up all the time. And then obviously momentum, like I mentioned before, for the Bull Charge bonus. The feats I've gone all across the bottom here. Weight of Vengeance is given that extra magnitude and cooldown to Anvil of Doom. These feats here are AoE based feats, so that's not really something to worry about too much. These middle ones here is also like a kind of like a contended thing in the past. Some people have said they like using Crushing Blows because it has that extra chance of consuming a little bit of vengeance and adding an extra magnitude to your hits. The problem with this is it's going to be pretty hard to keep your vengeance up all the time if you're using this and the Weight of Vengeance. This is going to be eating into your vengeance constantly, so you're going to have to be blocking to build that up. You're going to lose the stamina bonuses that I'm using elsewhere. Overall, I just don't think it's worth it. That would be the sweaty try-hard way probably, and you might be able to get a better build, a better higher DPS build out of the fighter, but I think Roiling Hatred is the way to go, which is whenever you critically strike and your vengeance gauge is at least 50% full, which is going to be from the start, you restore 5% vengeance. So that's going to stop it from draining. It's also going to give you that vengeance back from using Weight of Vengeance, which is going to drain 15 vengeance every time you use it. This is really going to be the easy, lazier way to keep your vengeance up all the time. I just think it works better having this on. I did try the other one in the past, but blocking all the time and all that just didn't seem worth it at all. Striker's Mark over here, this is your kind of like cheesy, you're going to be like stealing a bit of damage with this, because when you use your Mowdown daily, it's going to give you an extra 400 magnitude, because it's going to consume the physical vulnerability up debuff that's going to be on the boss. it removes that debuff, which is the one that the rogue is going to be applying to the boss, which really this is kind of an asshole feat to be using, because it's going to give you more damage, but it's actually going to take it from it's going to take damage from other people. I do like using Mowdown at the end of my rotation because of this. I use it more towards the end. I'm not trying to take that damage buff away from, first off, my powers and everyone else's. If you didn't want to be an asshole, you could just not pick the feat, or you could pick the Land Waster feat. Either way, it's not really going to do much, but in the end, you are trying to get more damage out. That is going to be the point of this, right? Everyone's sort of sweating and competing with each other these days. That's, always, but that's fine. Yeah, I think as long as you get all your powers out first before you use this, you're going to be fine. These last two feats as well, I've seen some people using Bloody Reprise in the past. When the Vengeance gauge drops, they use an encounter power and it pulls it back up. This could be a way that, if you really worked around it, you could work around the Crushing Blows thing. It could be draining it, and then you could use Bloody Reprise to build that Vengeance back up. Again, I want to do the easy, cheesy way, so I just go with Executioner's Cut, which is when you hit an enemy with less than 30% hit points, it deals an extra 50 magnitude additional damage. And it restores 3 Vengeance as you're doing it, so that actually helps you build Vengeance as well once you're towards the end of an enemy's health bar. This is going to build up nicely on all the mobs that spawn in on the trial, and then also when the bosses get low. Moving on to the boons, which for the guild boons, obviously this is just stat balancing. I'll just show you here. I've got the power bonus, the awareness bonus. For the utility, I actually do use movement speed most of the time. If I'm really confident I'm not going to die in the trial, obviously Revive Sickness if you think you are going to die and you want to reduce the amount that's going to affect you. Honestly, I would recommend using Revive Sickness. Basically, everyone can make use of this. It's not really much of a question whether you want movement speed, but if you think the movement speed is really going to help you get out the way of AoEs and stuff, then the movement speed might be better off for the fighter. For the campaign boons, I mean, like usual, it's pretty much every offense stat is picked. I obviously have the movement speed as well. I have the demonic mastery just because we do fight some, demons and stuff like that. I have the undead feat as well, which is probably going to be helping us in the trial. And then for the tier 5 boons, I've gone with Forte and I've gone with recharge speed. Here you might be able to go with action point gain as well, but honestly, like I said, I think recharge speed does help the fighter a lot more than action point gain because we can actually block while we're in combat but not fighting anything to build up that AP. Bloodlust is still going to be the master boon we use. The decreases target's defense. Last time I checked, that still wasn't working. The extra magnitude damage and then also the action point gain is what we're going to be using this one for. For the companions, so this is an augment build. I probably should have mentioned that earlier, but that's pretty much what most people are doing right now, other than if you can really swing using a striker companion. But obviously I'm a tank player, I'm not that invested into the DPS class, so this is going to be definitely the easiest way for me to do it. The Owlbear obviously being one of the only ones that gives 3 offense stats for the enhancement, the accuracy, combat advantage, and crit severity. For the equipment, this is the one thing that I did change. And it's actually why if I go to my stats, my crit serve is actually overcapped. It was lower before because I was actually using an older companion piece. I was using this one here, the green one from Sharandar, which I didn't have good companion pieces for offense stats, so I was just going with that for the time being. The accuracy and crit strike, obviously it's a much lower version, but I immediately put this one on because it's accuracy and crit severity, and they were both kind of close, and it was a new one, so I just slapped it on there. But that's the only difference between how the build looks now and how it was when I originally went into the trial. Here I have combat, advantage and crit strike, and then this blue version from Sharandar as well, the accuracy and crit strike again. Obviously these stats don't give that much anymore. They're not that big of a difference. It's really only stat balancing for these companion pieces. Ideally, you would want to build around having these higher item level ones from the new content. My other companion pieces that I do have is, I do actually have 3 of these Tarnished Emerald Talismans from the trial, which I got on the few attempts that we did on the first day. So those would be the things I'd be swapping to from these older pieces, these older Sharandar pieces. Obviously, we've got our Mythic Companion enchantment here, and then I'm going with Precision for the enhancement, which is going to increase the crit strike by 7.5%, just because that's what I ended up needing in the end. Now, this is something that I would be changing. If I was to really try and optimize this, I would be changing these companion bonuses here. This is what I went in with. I'll just show you here. So it's the Phase Spider for the crit chance and the combat advantage, the Batiri for the 11% damage versus bosses, the Dritz for crit chance and crit severity, the Staldorf for the 7.5% combat advantage, and the Alchemist for the crit chance and combat advantage. I'll tell you right now that if in my ideal world, I would be using triple damage bonus companions. The other ones being the Neverwinter Knight, which just increases your aggro damage by 7.5%. And then also the Minsk bonus, which is the damage versus strong enemies. The more dangerous the foe, the more damage is dealt, which obviously is going to be pretty high in trial boss fights. Having those 3 on here is probably going to be your best in slot situation, since those damage bonuses are going to be pretty big, as long as you can get all your really important stats built up. The other thing I would also do in an ideal situation is I'd be using the Raptor. So not the Feral Raptor, but the one that actually gives you power. I don't actually think I have the power one on this. I only have it on the Paladin. I just haven't got a chance to equip one yet, but that would be the ideal situation. Is I'd be using the Power Raptor, which is going to give you just an insane amount of stats. It's going to be the best case scenario for just the pure amount of stats you can get from it, the power. With that, you would have to have a whole group using it, which a lot of people were actually doing in the trial. I was putting myself in the support group because I didn't have the Raptor. I didn't want to hinder anyone, but that would be the best case to get all that power. And that's where I'll take away things like the Arms of the Last Resistance for that 5% power bonus. I would actually take that off if I didn't need it, if I had the Raptor on. And then also my insignias I would change around as well. That's going to be the best situation. So honestly, if you can build around having that Raptor on and have that really high stats, as well as having the 3 damage bonus, that would be where you would really optimize the DPS, in my opinion. This is obviously, like I said before, just what I went in with, so that's what I'm showing you. This worked, but there is a lot of ways you can really optimize this build, and you can optimize your character, and it's going to depend on what you have, what you can afford, and then also who you're running with in the group, what class you are. There's a lot of things that it's gonna depend on. Onto the mounts, obviously the boarworm appearance, as usual, it's always going to be the boarworm. This mount is my favorite. I'm just, a little aside there, but this is definitely a very important part of the build. The Toad combat power is, I'm pretty sure, it's still the best one. It has a really nice cast, it's a really high magnitude. Get yourself a Toad. The equip power here, I've got Dominant Force for the 4500 power. This is another place I could take power away if I had the Raptor set up. So I've heard a lot of people using Ferocity at the minute because it gives you those extra hits of damage, which is going to help proc the Band of Air more often. I've not looked into it too much, but that's probably what I would look at if I was getting rid of the Dominant power and having the Raptor bonus on. For the stable, you'll see here, this is not optimized for DPS in any way. This is kind of like a half and half split. I put all power on because I thought that would help me just as something, it will just generally all around help. It helps with threat on the tank, it helps with getting stats for DPS, it helps with the healer build if I was going to do a paladin healer build or anything like that. So I ended up going with a lot of power and then just cheap initiative insignias, and this is, funnily enough, it's kind of like a jack of all trades, master of none situation, because it doesn't really help in any of my builds. Like, I don't need it in the tank build. I could have, if I really wanted really good tank stats, I could have gone with a lot of different insignias. Also, for the DPS, it doesn't really help either, because ideally I would have that Raptor on. I wouldn't need all this power back here, and I would, I'd be putting it into the other offensive stats instead. Same thing with the insignia bonuses. The Gladiator's Guile does really help the fighter DPS because you get that extra movement speed and stuff, which is pretty important, not having a dodge. But obviously this isn't optimized. It just isn't. Like, you would want to have probably some Assassin's Covenants in here would be the way you'd go about it, just to get those extra stats instead of, swapping out the defensive stats for the offensive stats. So yeah, I would probably be throwing maybe a couple of Assassin's Covenants in here and then leave it at that. That would probably be what I'd change. But I'd also be changing the insignias out to be stuff that's more optimized. The collars are fine here, the movement speed, the encounter power damage, stamina gain is fine, recharge speed, and then obviously just the rough astral diamonds. It's all, that one doesn't really matter too much, but these are all just item level, and then just the important bonuses, which I think is the recharge speed and the encounter power damage. And then arguably the movement speed as well, probably be pretty good. So that's pretty much it for all the build stuff. I'll just show you here down on the bar. Obviously you have the Hawk, which is still chunky and still really nice. That's going to be something that's very useful. I'm using also the Forger's box. Some people don't like relying on this, especially when you're progging new content, because of, you're going to die pretty often. But but I like using it early, and then usually by the time you die, hopefully 10 minutes has been up and you can use it again. Another nice thing is when all the stats are just under 90%, as I was talking about before, any of these extra bonuses could be useful for it, which is also something to keep in mind. In a perfect world, we'd be getting that 6% recharge speed every time, to be honest. Then ignore the mess in my inventory because I've been playing a lot of Destiny 2 at the minute and I've not been keeping track of all this stuff. But the potions I believe I was using is down here. The Wildstorm Elixir, the Squash Soup, and the Flask of Potency for the crit and crit set of bonuses. I was also then using the Dragon Slaying Potion and the Protection from Dragon Scroll after I was jumping across the gap with the old grappling hook. Then I'd spam these really quickly before we go in. So I'm just going to check out my stats here if I eat all my potions. See what my stats look like over here. Okay, so this is looking all right. So the power is obviously going to be capped with Runic Aura involved. The combat advantage is going to give me an extra 5% when I'm in combat with an enemy, which I'll start this here. It goes up to 84.9, which then with the extra 5% from the tutor companion that somebody's going to be using in the group, hopefully, that's going to get me to 90%. If someone's not using a tutor companion, I could always use this instead, the Sun Lord's Gift Elixir from the Vault of Piety, and that's going to give me the 5% combat advantage there. Combat advantage is going to be a little bit more important than the crit stat, so I'm okay with dropping the Wildstorm to use this in its place. Once the Ribcage is procced there, the crit sev is going to be capped thanks to my new companion piece I put on. The crit strike is going to be, what's that going to be, 73, 74-ish%. The companion bonus is going to give the extra 7.5% to cap that out. So all in all, we're going to be looking at pretty balanced stats around there. The accuracy is pretty high compared to a lot of DPS classes because of the Forte and also the helmet that we're using. We're pretty much going to be capped on almost everything. I'll just give it a go here. So we'll just do a little rotation here and get the rib cage up, and then there we go. We've got 90% crit strike, crit sev. The combat advantage would be 89.9 if I had on the if we had a tutor. And then the power would be capped if we had the Runic Aura applied. So that's looking pretty good. You can always just munch on some Invocation Blessings as well if you want to. So because I have Crit Strike on the Forges box up here, that's actually also almost replicating the Crit Aura that the Paladin could be running, which is helping me cap that. It would be a little bit short, I believe, if I didn't have that up, which is fine. It would be just a couple of % under or something like that. So these stats look a little bit better than they would, unless I had a Paladin in there, then it would be the same. Now for the rotation in the trial is, I mean, I was going to put this plainly, that a lot of the deal with rotations or whatever in trial, there's not that much to it. It's pretty much just going to be that you keep really good uptime, right? It's going to be that pretty much when you have encounters off of cooldown, you're using them. Unless in a couple of situations where you really want to wait, save the encounters, you're pretty much going to be okay with just spamming them whenever they're off cooldown. I'm really going to be honest here. One thing to always remember is obviously to use your heavy slash to get that additional damage bonus up there. 10 seconds it's going to be up for, which is going to be pretty useful. At the start of the trial, obviously you want to keep your vengeance up. You want to build your vengeance up right at the start. It's going to be kept up for the rest of the fight because of your feats. If you do need to build it up, you can just really quickly dig in and just build it up there. What I like to do at the start of the trial is when the tank takes the aggro from the boss, I like to hit a couple of reaves just to get the just to feel like I'm doing something, you know, get some hits off there. Might be able to proc a Band of Air or two, which actually it did up there. The Band of Air just procced and gave me one of my stacks for my ribcage. You have a few seconds now because people do like to wait till after they do the first split with the mechanics before they start using their artifacts and stuff. So I actually do like using a ball charge and a anvil just at the start, give you a couple of those stacks there. And just to get some more damage out right at the beginning. It's not a big deal. By the time they come back in, you're obviously going to want to make sure the heavy slash is up. You're going to want to use your artifact. I then like to use my encounters. And then I like to actually cancel the hawk with the toad, which is pretty useful to do. The hawk does get stuck sometimes and doesn't cast. But if you cast the toad directly after it, it will keep the timing right. Because obviously you can use the hawk every 30 seconds, which would even it out over the minute to be able to use the toad again, but also the toad really nicely cancels it there. Then you would probably use a Griffin's Wrath, and then at the end there I would use my daily, cancel it with an encounter. I'd go back into a rotation, obviously keeping up your heavy slash as much as you can. The thing with rotations these days on DPS classes in this game is you're going to want to just figure out what is going to work best for you. You're really going to want to look at the powers and see which powers blend into other powers. There's a lot of trial and error with it, and especially with how fast you can how fast you can click your buttons doing certain things. It's not something to worry about getting the exact right rotation every time. As much as I'm showing you this here, honestly, I'm just trying to like recall this from memory, because most of the time when I'm actually doing it in the content, I'm just going for it. I'm not really worrying about exactly what I'm pressing at what time. I'm just trying to get as much uptime as I can and focusing on mechanics most of the time. So I'll just try again to show you like a full rotation, see if I can not mess this up when I'm doing it to show you here. Now I'm on camera, I feel like I'm gonna get nervous. Obviously that whole rotation thing is probably only going to happen on artifact phases. A lot of the rest of the time you're just going to be hitting encounters whenever you get them. The reason we have artificers really helps with making sure that even if we use our encounters at the wrong time, we can still get them back faster by giving us that 2-second cooldown. You also want to make sure, obviously, like always, everyone's using their debuffs at the same time, everyone using their artifacts and mounts at the same time, which is really going to get you the most damage out. I actually forgot my AoE DPS stuff I wanted to add in here. The powers I would use in AoE would be Tremor, and there would be Onslaught, since I really do like those powers. They're pretty cool, they do a lot of damage, and they pair well with these feats down here. Prepared Slam. When you get the effect of Heavy Slash or encounter powers, which deal damage to multiple enemies, which is those encounters, consume the effect of Heavy Slash and deal an additional 280 magnitude damage. That's really spicy for AoE, so that's definitely one I'd mention there. Obviously, you're not using Weight of Vengeance in AoE because you're not using Anvil. I would use Heavier Slash, which after you reave a bunch of enemies, you'll get that extra damage on your Heavy Slash on like one big chunky guy or whatever. Also, Land Waster can allow you to get the extra daily out. You'll be able to get an extra daily after you use Earthshaker, the Shockwave, which is pretty cool. And then again, you'd be able to make use of Bloody Reprise in AoE to help you really keep that vengeance up when you're in between fights and stuff like that. Executioner's Cut is obviously still useful there. I also prefer the run speed much more, even if it would be losing the 10% crit. I definitely would run the Greater Endurance in AoE. And then of course, Earthshaker is a really, really chunky AoE power to just stun all the mobs and do a big load of damage when you're in the dungeons. That's it for my DPS fighter build today, guys. I know it's pretty long. It's longer than the videos I usually do, but I kind of just wanted to go for it and talk a little bit about like why I'm using certain things and all that. And hopefully you guys liked it. And hopefully it helps you guys out to do some decent damage on the fighter. Like I've mentioned, I'm not talking shit. This build actually did work for me, and I wasn't really expecting it to do much, but to at least just get me through the trial, and it actually it worked out. And also, there's many changes you can do to this to really optimize it. It's not going to be perfect by any means, but also, if you do have advice to give other fighters, if you know something that I didn't mention or something that might help somebody else out, do mention it in the comments, because I really would like people to get more of a collective idea of what a lot of people do, not just listen to one person, since that's never going to be the best way to get good or to, really get your build sorted out. I appreciate all you guys for watching and supporting the channel. If you could drop me a like and subscribe, of course, that would be very much appreciated. Also, if there's anything else you'd like me to do, any other videos coming up that's not the Paladin build, because I will be working on that, then also let me know in the comments. Stay safe, guys, and thanks for watching.